I never meant to send that message. It was supposed to go to my best friend, not my boss. 3 careless words that changed everything. And when she showed up at my door that same night, I realized this wasn't just a mistake. It was the beginning of something that could cost me my job or change my life forever. Before I begin, if you've ever made one single mistake that turned your whole world upside down, please leave a comment, and subscribe to Storyflow Diaries. I still remember the exact moment my thumb hit send. It was late, too late for good decisions. I had just gotten home from another 12-hour shift at the firm, loosened my tie, kicked off my shoes, and collapsed onto my couch like a man who hadn't seen daylight in weeks. My phone buzzed in my hand. It was her again, Miss Corrine Lawson, my boss. She was the kind of woman who walked into a room and made every conversation stop, not because she was loud, but because she didn't need to be. Tall, composed, elegant in a way that felt untouchable. She always smelled faintly of jasmine and something sharper underneath, maybe ambition. I admired her. Everyone did. But for me, admiration had slowly, dangerously, started turning into something else. That night, she had texted about a client presentation. "We'll need the revised numbers before 8 a.m. I trust you can handle it, Adam." I stared at the screen longer than necessary. My name always looked different when she typed it. Personal, direct, close. I wasn't drunk. I want to make that clear. I was just exhausted. And when you're exhausted, your guard drops. Your mind wanders into places it shouldn't go. I opened another chat. My best friend, Marcus. He'd been teasing me for months about the way I looked at her. "Man, one day you're gonna slip and tell her you're in love," he'd joked. I typed fast, barely thinking. I swear, sometimes I think I want her. 3 words. I want her. Simple, stupid, dangerous. I hit send and immediately felt something was wrong. The thread at the top of my screen wasn't Marcus's. It was hers. The air left my lungs like someone had punched me. I read it again, hoping my eyes were playing tricks on me. I swear, sometimes I think I want her. Sent to Corrine Lawson, my boss. My stomach twisted so hard I thought I might actually throw up. I didn't breathe for a full 10 seconds, maybe longer. Then the 3 little dots appeared. She was typing. I considered throwing my phone across the room, or jumping out of my 3rd-floor window, or faking my own death and moving to another country. All of those options felt more reasonable than facing what was happening. The dots disappeared. No reply. My heart pounded so loud I could hear it in my ears. Seconds passed, then a full minute, then 5. Nothing. I typed quickly, clumsy fingers stumbling over themselves. "I'm so sorry. That message wasn't meant for you. It was for a friend. Completely out of context. Please ignore it." I stared at the screen, waiting. The dots appeared again. This time, they didn't disappear. "Interesting," she wrote. My mouth went dry. That was it. 1 word. Interesting. What did that even mean? Interesting like you're fired? Interesting like report to HR in the morning? Or interesting like something else? I typed, erased, typed again. It was stupid. I apologize if that was inappropriate. Another pause, longer this time. Then, "Adam, are you always this honest when you're tired?" I swallowed. She knew I was tired. She paid attention. Why did that make my chest feel tight? I hesitated before answering. Only when I forget to think first. 3 dots again. My pulse jumped. Then she wrote, "Maybe you should think less." I blinked at the screen. What kind of response was that? I stared at her name, at the small circular photo of her professional headshot, the composed smile, the sharp blazer, the eyes that always seemed to know more than they revealed. My phone buzzed again. "Are you home?" she asked. Now my heart wasn't just racing, it was sprinting. Home? Why did that matter? I typed back cautiously, "Yes." There was no immediate response this time, just silence, thick, heavy. I stood up from the couch and started pacing. My apartment suddenly felt too small, too warm. I ran a hand through my hair, replaying every interaction we'd ever had, the lingering eye contact in meetings, the way her voice softened slightly when she spoke to me, the time she touched my arm for just a second longer than necessary. I had imagined those things, hadn't I? Because women like her didn't notice men like me. Not like that. I jumped when my phone buzzed again. "Good," she wrote. And then nothing. No explanation, no follow-up. I stared at the message, my mind spinning through worst-case scenarios. Was she coming over? No, that was ridiculous, completely inappropriate. She was my boss. She was composed, controlled, strategic. She wouldn't do something reckless. I set the phone down on the kitchen counter and tried to breathe. I splashed cold water on my face, told myself I was overthinking, told myself to go to bed and deal with whatever consequences came in the morning. And then there was a knock at my door. Not loud, not frantic, just 3 slow, deliberate taps. My entire body froze. No one ever knocked on my door this late. I lived alone. My friends always texted first. The hallway outside my apartment was usually dead silent after 9. I looked at the clock. 10:47 p.m. Another knock. Same rhythm. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I thought it might bruise them. I walked slowly toward the door, each step feeling unreal. My mind screamed that this was impossible, that it couldn't be her, that I was being paranoid. But deep down, I knew. I stopped in front of the door and stared at it like it might explode. I didn't want to open it, and I desperately wanted to open it. My hand hovered over the handle. Another knock, softer this time, almost patient. I swallowed and finally turned the knob. The door creaked open. And there she was, Corrine Lawson, standing in the hallway under the dim yellow light, wearing a dark coat over a simple black dress. Her hair was down, not in the tight professional bun she wore at work. It fell softly over her shoulders. She looked different, less corporate, more human. My throat closed. She studied my face for a long moment, not angry, not amused, just curious. "You should really be more careful with your messages," she said quietly. And before I could respond, she stepped inside. She didn't wait for an invitation. She stepped past me slowly, the faint scent of jasmine following her into my apartment, and I stood there frozen with the door still half open, wondering if I had finally lost my mind. I closed it carefully, almost silently, like I was afraid any sudden noise would shatter whatever fragile reality this was. My apartment had never felt so exposed. The soft lamp in the corner cast a warm glow over my living room, but it suddenly seemed too intimate, too revealing. She removed her coat with deliberate calm, draping it neatly over the back of my dining chair as if she had every right to be there. I couldn't even remember how to stand properly. My hands felt useless at my sides. "Miss Lawson," I started, my voice barely cooperating. She turned to look at me, and there was something in her eyes I had never seen at the office. Not authority, not calculation, something softer. "Corrine," she corrected gently. My heart skipped in a way that felt almost painful. I had never called her by her first name before. It felt forbidden, intimate. "Corrine," I repeated, and even saying it made my pulse jump. She studied my face carefully, like she was trying to read every thought before I spoke it. "You looked terrified when you opened the door," she said, her lips curving slightly. I let out a shaky breath. "I thought I'd just ruined my career." She tilted her head. And now I wasn't sure what I felt. Fear was still there, yes, but it was tangled up with something electric and dangerous. "Now I'm not sure what's happening," I admitted. She walked slowly around the room, taking in my bookshelf, the framed photo of my parents, the stack of work files on the coffee table. Her presence filled the space in a way that made it hard to breathe normally. "You said you want me," she said quietly, not looking at me. The words landed between us like something fragile and explosive at the same time. My mouth went dry. "I said sometimes," I corrected weakly. She turned then, meeting my eyes fully. That wasn't a denial. Silence wrapped around us. I could hear the hum of my refrigerator in the kitchen, the faint sound of traffic outside 3 floors below. Every ordinary noise felt magnified because of how extraordinary this moment was. "Why did you come here?" I finally asked. It was the question looping in my mind since I opened the door. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked closer until there were only a few feet between us, close enough that I could see the faint line of tension in her jaw, close enough that I could see she wasn't perfectly composed as she always appeared in the boardroom. "Because," she said softly, "I wanted to see if you meant it." My heart pounded so hard I felt dizzy. "And if I did?" I asked before I could stop myself. She exhaled slowly, and for the first time since I'd known her, she looked unsure. "Adam, do you have any idea how complicated this is?" Of course I did. She was my boss, the head of our department, the woman who signed my performance reviews. One whisper of impropriety could end everything I'd worked for. "Yes," I said quietly. "That's why I tried to apologize." She searched my face again. "Did you mean the apology?" The truth hovered on my tongue. I could lie. I could say yes and end this now, save my job, protect my carefully built reputation. But the way she was looking at me made lying feel impossible. "I meant that I shouldn't have sent it," I said slowly, "but I didn't mean that it wasn't true." The air between us shifted. Something unspoken clicked into place. Her shoulders lowered just slightly, like she had been holding tension all evening. "You're not the only one who's noticed things," she said. That sentence alone felt like stepping off a cliff. "Noticed what?" I asked. She gave a small, almost embarrassed smile. "The way you look at me in meetings, the way you stay late when I stay late, the way you challenge me in discussions like you're not afraid of me." I swallowed. "I'm definitely afraid of you." She laughed softly, and hearing her laugh in my apartment felt surreal. "No," she said, stepping even closer, "you're not." We were standing too close now, close enough that I could feel the warmth from her body. My brain screamed that this was a terrible idea, that tomorrow morning could destroy us both. But my heart didn't care about tomorrow. "If anyone finds out," I began. She nodded. "I know." Her voice turned serious again. "That's why I need to know something before this goes any further." I held my breath. "Are you drawn to me because I'm your boss, or because it's me?" That question hit deeper than I expected. I hadn't really separated the two before. Her authority had always been part of the package, but when I pictured her now, standing here without the blazer, without the boardroom table between us, it wasn't power that made my chest tighten. It was her. The way she noticed details, the way she carried responsibility without complaint, the quiet loneliness I sometimes glimpsed in her eyes after everyone else had left. "It's you," I said honestly. She studied me for a long moment, searching for any hint of hesitation. I didn't give her one. Finally, she nodded once, as if she'd made a decision. "Then we need to be very careful," she said firmly. Relief and anticipation tangled together inside me. "Careful how?" I asked. "No public displays, no favoritism, no blurred professional lines at work," she said firmly. "If we do this, it stays separate from the office." "If we do this?" The words echoed in my mind. "And if it becomes too complicated?" I asked. She held my gaze steadily. "Then we walk away before it destroys everything." That sounded simple in theory. It felt impossible in practice. She reached out then, slowly, giving me every opportunity to step back. Her fingers brushed against my wrist, light and tentative. The contact sent a shock through me that made my breath hitch. "You still look terrified," she murmured. "I am," I admitted. "Good," she replied softly. "That means you understand the risk." She didn't kiss me then. Instead, she stepped back slightly, creating space again. "I'm not here to make an impulsive mistake," she said. "I came because I needed to see your face when you told the truth." I felt something shift inside me at that. This wasn't reckless or predatory. It wasn't some secret power game. It was two adults standing on the edge of something dangerous and trying to decide whether it was worth the fall. "And was it worth coming?" I asked quietly. Her eyes softened in a way that made my chest ache. "Yes," she said simply. Silence settled again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was charged, full of possibility. She glanced toward the door, then back at me. "I should go," she said, though neither of us moved. "If I stay too long, we'll both forget to think." I managed a small, nervous smile. "You did tell me to think less." Her lips curved again. "Not recklessly." She picked up her coat and slipped it back on, her composure slowly returning like armor. But before she reached for the door, she paused. "Tomorrow," she said softly, "we act like nothing happened." I nodded. "And tonight?" I asked. She stepped closer one last time, close enough that her voice was barely above a whisper. "Tonight," she said, "you can stop pretending you don't want me." Then she opened the door and walked out, leaving me standing in the quiet of my apartment, heart racing, knowing that whatever line we had just crossed, there was no going back. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every second of her visit like it was a scene from someone else's life. The way she had said my name, the way her fingers brushed my wrist, the way she looked at me when I told her it was her, not the title, not the power. Around 3 a.m, I finally gave up pretending I could rest and sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my phone. No new messages, no sudden, "this was a mistake," just silence. And somehow that silence felt heavier than anything else. By the time my alarm rang at 6, I felt like I had lived an entire lifetime in a single night. I showered, dressed carefully, choosing a navy suit instead of my usual gray. I told myself it was coincidence, not subconscious effort, but I ironed my shirt twice. When I walked into the office lobby, everything looked the same. The marble floors, the polished glass walls, the receptionist greeting me with her usual smile. But I felt different, like I was carrying a secret no one else could see. The elevator ride to the 23rd floor felt longer than usual. I kept wondering if someone would look at me and just know, if my face was giving everything away. When the doors opened, the familiar hum of keyboards and low conversations filled the air. I walked to my desk, placed my briefcase down, and forced myself to breathe normally. Then I saw her. She was already in her office, visible through the glass walls, speaking on the phone. Hair up, blazer sharp, expression composed. It was like the woman who had stood in my apartment last night didn't exist. She didn't look at me right away, and for a split second doubt crept in. Had I imagined the connection? Had I misread everything? But then, as she ended her call, her eyes lifted. They found mine across the floor. Just for a second. Professional, neutral. But there was something there. A flicker, a quiet acknowledgement. Then she looked away. We acted like nothing had happened, just like she said. At 10, we had the client presentation. I stood beside her at the conference table, explaining the revised numbers while she navigated the conversation with effortless control. Our shoulders almost brushed once, and I felt the electricity of it, but neither of us reacted. No one else noticed anything unusual. If anything, we looked like the same efficient team we'd always been. After the meeting, as everyone filed out, she lingered behind. "Adam," she said in her usual firm tone, "a word." My stomach tightened, though I knew this was part of the act. I followed her into our office and closed the door. The second the glass muted the outside noise, the air shifted slightly. Not unprofessional, just aware. She walked to her desk and flipped through a file, maintaining the appearance of business. "You handled that well," she said calmly. "Thank you." I stood across from her, keeping a respectful distance. She looked up then, meeting my eyes. There was the smallest curve to her lips. "You didn't look terrified today." I allowed myself a faint smile. "I'm learning to manage the risk." Her gaze held mine for a beat too long. "Good." A knock interrupted us, and she immediately returned to her corporate composure. "Come in," she called. The moment passed, but it lingered under the surface. The rest of the day was a test of self-control. Every casual interaction felt layered. Every time she walked past my desk, I was hyper-aware of her presence. Yet nothing inappropriate happened. No secret touches, no private whispers, just professionalism. That restraint almost made it more intense. Around 7 in the evening, most of the staff had left. I was finishing up some reports when I heard her heels approach. She stopped beside my desk. "Working late again?" she asked lightly. "You are too," I replied. She glanced around the nearly empty floor. "Walk with me." My heart kicked up, but I stood and followed her toward the elevators. The building was quieter now, the fluorescent lights softer. Inside the elevator, we stood side by side, the silence thicker than before. "Dinner," she said suddenly. I blanked. "Dinner?" "Neutral territory," she clarified. "Public, safe." That word again, safe. "Are you asking me out?" I asked carefully. She exhaled softly, as if the simplicity of the question amused her. "Yes, Adam, I am." A slow warmth spread through my chest. "Then yes," I said, "I'd like that." The elevator doors opened, and we stepped out into the lobby like two colleagues leaving work. No one would have guessed anything more. We agreed to meet separately at a small restaurant a few blocks away. Nothing flashy, quiet, discreet. When I arrived, she was already seated at a corner table. Without the office setting, she seemed different again, more relaxed, more accessible. We talked about everything except work at first, her childhood, my parents, the fact that she loved old jazz records and Sunday morning walks. I found myself laughing more easily than I had in months. And somewhere between the appetizers and the main course, the tension shifted into something steadier, real. "You're not what I expected when you first joined the firm," she admitted. "Is that good or bad?" I asked carefully. "Good," she said without hesitation. "You're honest, even when it scares you." I thought about the text, the accidental confession that had started all of this. "Sometimes honesty is just bad timing," I said. She tilted her head. "Or perfect timing." When dinner ended, neither of us rushed to leave. Outside, the night air was cool. We stood on the sidewalk, the city buzzing around us. "This is the part where we decide how complicated we want our lives to become," she said quietly. I looked at her, really looked at her, not as my boss, not as a risk, just as a woman standing in front of me, waiting. Complicated doesn't scare me. Losing something real does. Something softened in her expression. Slowly, deliberately, she reached for my hand, not hidden, not secretive, just two people standing close under a streetlight. "Then let's not lose it," she whispered. And when she leaned in this time, the kiss wasn't impulsive or reckless. It was slow, intentional, the kind that says, "This is a choice." When we finally pulled apart, my heart felt steadier than it had the night before. The fear was still there, but it was no longer paralyzing. It was balanced by something stronger, hope. But neither of us knew that hope would soon be tested in ways we couldn't yet imagine. The next few weeks felt like living two separate lives stitched together by fragile thread. During the day, she was Miss Lawson again, precise, strategic, unreadable. I was her senior analyst, focused and efficient, careful not to linger too long in her office or let my eyes betray anything. At night, or in quiet corners of the city where no one from the firm would think to look, we were just Corrine and Adam, two people navigating something tender and terrifying at the same time. It wasn't reckless. We made rules. No texting during office hours unless it was work. No shared rides to or from the building. No visible familiarity. If anyone entered a room unexpectedly, space came between us automatically. It almost became second nature. But secrecy has weight, even when it's chosen. I started noticing how often I checked over my shoulder, how quickly I pulled my hand away in public spaces, how every laugh we shared outside of work carried the silent question, what if someone sees? And yet, despite the tension, I had never felt more alive. Corrine wasn't cold or distant the way some people assumed. In private, she was thoughtful. She listened carefully, asked questions about my childhood, my ambitions, my fears. One evening at her apartment, as we sat on her balcony overlooking the city, lights, she admitted something that surprised me. "Do you know how lonely it is at the top?" she asked softly. I looked at her, the woman everyone admired, the woman who commanded rooms without raising her voice. "You don't seem lonely," I said. She gave a faint, sad smile. "That's because I can't afford to." That was the first time I truly understood the distance she kept at work. Authority had isolated her. People respected her, but they didn't know her, and somewhere along the way, she had stopped expecting to be known. "I don't want to be another secret you carry alone," I told her that night. She turned to me, her expression serious. "You're not a secret because I'm ashamed," she said. "You're a secret because this world we work in is ruthless." I knew she was right. Office politics weren't just gossip, they were weapons. One rumor could undo years of effort. And as much as I believed in what we were building, I also knew the imbalance of power between us could be twisted into something ugly. A month into our relationship, the first crack appeared. It started small. A look from one of the associates during a team meeting, a whisper that stopped abruptly when I entered the break room. I tried to tell myself I was imagining it, but instincts don't lie easily. Then came the email. It was anonymous, sent to my work account late one evening, no subject line, just the single sentence, "Be careful who you trust." My stomach dropped as I read it. I stared at the screen, my pulse quickening. It could have meant anything, office rivalry, a warning about a client, but deep down I knew it wasn't random. That night I showed it to Corrine at her apartment. She read it twice, her expression tightening almost imperceptibly. "This could be nothing," she said calmly, "or it could be someone fishing." "Fishing for what?" I asked, though I already knew. "For leverage," she replied. She set her phone down and looked at me with that same measured focus she used in negotiations. "We don't panic. We don't change our behavior suddenly. If someone suspects something, overcorrecting will confirm it." Her composure steadied me, but fear still crept in around the edges. "And if someone actually knows?" I asked. She held my gaze. "Then we face it directly." A week later, the situation escalated. HR announced a routine internal review, nothing unusual on the surface. The firm did performance and conduct audits annually, but the timing felt too precise, too coincidental. I tried to stay rational. We had been careful. There were no inappropriate messages on company devices, no public displays, no favoritism in assignments. In fact, if anything, Corrine had been harder on me professionally to avoid suspicion. Still, the anxiety grew. One afternoon, as I stepped out of the elevator, I overheard my name. "Close with her lately," someone murmured. "Noticed that too." The voices hushed when they saw me. My chest tightened. That evening, Corrine called me into her office just before closing. The blinds were half drawn, the room dimmer than usual. "The review isn't random," she said quietly once the door was shut. My stomach sank. You know that for sure? She nodded once. A complaint was filed. The words felt like a physical blow. Against who? I asked. Against me, she said steadily. My mind raced. For what? She held my eyes. Alleged inappropriate relationship with a subordinate. The room seemed to tilt. Do they have proof? I asked quickly. No, she replied. Not yet. The silence that followed was heavy with implication. I felt anger rising, sharp and protective. This is my fault, I said quietly. If I hadn't sent that text. Stop, she interrupted firmly. We both chose this. Don't reduce it to one message. But guilt still gnawed at me. What happens now? I asked. She straightened slightly, slipping back into strategic mode. HR will conduct interviews. They'll look for patterns, conflicts of interest, favoritism. My throat tightened. And if they decide it's true? She didn't hesitate. Then one of us goes. The simplicity of it made my chest ache. One of us goes. Years of her building her reputation, my entire career just beginning to gain momentum, all balanced on a secret that started with 3 careless words. I won't let you take the fall for this, I told her that night. Her expression softened just slightly. You don't get to make that decision alone. For the first time since this began, the risk didn't feel thrilling. It felt real, dangerous in a way that could leave permanent scars. As I left her office that night, the office floor felt colder. Eyes seemed to linger longer. Every casual greeting felt loaded. And for the first time, I wondered if love, because that's what this was becoming, was worth the potential wreckage. But when my phone buzzed later with a simple message from her, whatever happens, we face it together, I realized something. The fear of losing my job was sharp. The fear of losing her was sharper. And deep down, I knew the real test of what we were building hadn't even begun yet. The HR interview was scheduled for Monday morning at 9. I didn't sleep the night before. I lay awake staring at the faint glow of streetlights through my blinds, replaying every interaction Corrine and I had ever had inside the office. Every glance, every meeting, every moment that might have looked different from the outside. By the time I arrived at work, my stomach felt hollow. The firm was unusually quiet, or maybe it just felt that way because my nerves were stretched so tight. At exactly 9, an email notification popped up. Please report to conference room B. No smiley face, no pleasantries, just clinical and direct. Inside the room sat 2 HR representatives and 1 senior partner, Mr. Delaney. His expression was unreadable, but there was something cold behind his polite smile. I shook hands, sat down, and folded my hands carefully in my lap so they wouldn't see them tremble. The questions began simply. How was my workload? Did I feel supported by leadership? Had I ever experienced favoritism or inappropriate conduct in the workplace? My answers were steady, measured. No, I had not. Yes, the leadership was professional. Yes, Miss Lawson maintained clear boundaries. Every word felt like walking across thin ice. Then Mr. Delaney leaned forward slightly. Have you ever engaged in a personal relationship with Miss Lawson? The room shrank. My heart pounded in my ears. I could lie, protect us both, or I could tell the truth and risk destroying everything. Corrine's voice echoed in my mind. We face it directly. I swallowed. Yes, I said quietly. The air shifted instantly. Pens paused. Eyes sharpened. Can you elaborate? One of the HR reps asked. I chose my words carefully. Our relationship developed outside of work. It has not influenced professional decisions. There has been no favoritism, no misuse of authority. Mr. Delaney's gaze didn't waver. When did it begin? I hesitated only briefly. About 6 weeks ago. They exchanged subtle glances. I could feel the shift in tone, the professional courtesy thinning. Are you aware that relationships between supervisors and subordinates violate company policy? My chest tightened. I'm aware they're strongly discouraged, I replied, and that disclosure is required, which you did not provide, he said evenly. That hit harder than I expected, not because he was wrong, but because it forced me to confront the truth. We had chosen secrecy over transparency. No, I admitted, we didn't. The interview ended without hostility, but also without reassurance. As I stepped back onto the office floor, it felt like everyone could see the outcome written on my face. I didn't look toward Corinne's office. I couldn't. 2 hours later, I saw her walking toward the same conference room. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second. She didn't falter, neither did I. When she emerged nearly an hour later, her posture was still straight, but her expression carried something heavier. She didn't call me in, she didn't text. We both understood that anything now could be scrutinized. That evening, just as I was packing up to leave, an all-staff email went out. Mandatory meeting, tomorrow at 10 a.m. My stomach dropped. This was moving faster than I expected. The next morning, the entire department gathered in the large conference hall. Murmurs filled the air. Corinne stood at the front beside Mr. Delaney. She looked composed, but I could see the tension in her jaw. Mr. Delaney addressed the room first, speaking about company values and professional boundaries. The words felt rehearsed. Then he cleared his throat. Effective immediately, Miss Lawson will be stepping down from her position as department head. A wave of whispers rippled through the room. My heart slammed against my ribs. Stepping down. The phrase echoed painfully. Corinne stepped forward, her voice steady. This decision reflects the firm's commitment to maintaining clear boundaries in leadership. I accept responsibility for not disclosing a personal relationship in accordance with policy. Responsibility, not blame, not shame, but responsibility. My chest ached. I knew what she was doing, protecting the firm, protecting me. The meeting ended quickly after that. People avoided looking directly at either of us. Some looked sympathetic, others looked vindicated. By noon, Corinne's nameplate was already being removed from her office door. I stood frozen at my desk, anger and guilt tangling inside me. She hadn't mentioned my name. The announcement didn't specify the other party. It was implied, but not confirmed. She was absorbing the fallout alone. An hour later, my phone buzzed. A personal text. Meet me downstairs. I left immediately. Outside the building, she stood near the curb, coat on, box of personal items in her arms. Seeing her like that, stripped of title, of office, of authority, broke something inside me. You shouldn't have done that alone, I said the second I reached her. She gave a tired but gentle smile. It wasn't alone. You're the one stepping down, I said, my voice tight, not me. Because I made the final decision not to disclose, she replied calmly. I knew the policy better. I chose the risk. I shook my head. We chose it. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. Listen to me, Adam. Your career is just beginning. Mine was already established. This doesn't end me. It shouldn't have to end anything, I said. For the first time since I'd known her, her composure cracked slightly. Sometimes leadership means absorbing the impact, even when it hurts. Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall there on the sidewalk. What happens now? I asked quietly. She adjusted the box in her arms. Now I take some time, reevaluate, and you, she looked at me with something that felt like both pride and sorrow. You keep going. And us? I asked, because that was the question that mattered most. She held my gaze steadily. That depends, she said softly, on whether what we have can survive without the secrecy that once protected it. The weight of that truth settled heavily between us. Our relationship had been forged in tension, in risk. Without the office walls and stolen glances, who were we? I reached for her hand, not caring who might see now. "I don't want to lose you because of this," I said. She squeezed my hand gently. "Then don't." A taxi pulled up beside the curb. She opened the door but paused before getting in. "One reckless text," she said with a faint, bittersweet smile, "and here we are." I let out a shaky breath. "I'd send it again," I admitted. Her eyes softened. "I know." Then she got into the taxi and I stood there watching it pull away, realizing that the consequences of that night weren't finished yet, not even close. The days after Corrine stepped down were surreal. The office felt emptier, quieter, almost hollow without her presence. I tried to focus on my work, but every spreadsheet, every client email, every passing colleague reminded me of what had changed. People were polite, even cordial, but there was an unmistakable distance now. Rumors floated just beneath the surface, murmured voices that never quite reached my ears but seemed to linger in the walls. I could feel the tension each time I walked past my former boss's office, now empty, a symbol of the cost of our choices. I tried calling her once that week, just to hear her voice. She didn't pick up. Later, a single text came through. "Need space. Call when things settle." I stared at the screen, my chest tightening. Space? Things settle? Those were vague words, but they carried weight. I didn't call again. I didn't push, but I thought about her constantly, at my desk, during lunch, even on the walk home in the evenings. Her absence was more than physical. It left a hole in my days, a quiet ache in every interaction I had. By the weekend, I realized I hadn't really processed what had happened. I went to the small cafe we had first gone to for dinner, hoping maybe that seeing it again would help me feel closer to her. I ordered my usual coffee and sat at the same corner table. My hands fidgeted with the napkin holder. Everything felt empty. Then my phone buzzed. "Meet me at the park near my apartment. Now." My heart jumped and I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my coat and headed out, weaving through the city streets until I reached the quiet park behind her building. She was there, sitting on a bench, hands folded in her lap, staring down at the grass. The evening was crisp, the last hints of sunlight painting the trees in muted gold. "Corrine?" I said softly as I approached. She looked up and gave me a small, tired smile. "Adam," she replied. We stood in silence for a moment, just letting the distance between us exist without judgment. Finally, she spoke. "This has been harder than I expected." I sat beside her, careful not to crowd her. "For both of us," I admitted. She nodded. "I knew stepping down would be difficult, but I didn't anticipate feeling exposed, vulnerable." I reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You were never alone in this. I'm here, always." Her eyes softened, but a shadow lingered. "It's not just that. It's the whispers, the office gossip. Even if no one knows specifics, people notice. They notice changes. They notice relationships. People will talk." I exhaled slowly. "And we can't control that." "No," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "We can't. And yet I feel responsible for you, for your career." I took her hand, squeezing it gently. "You've done enough, more than anyone else would." We sat together quietly, watching the park darken as the city lights flickered on. There was something in the stillness that allowed honesty to flow more freely. "I never thought I'd be in a position like this," she admitted, "to care about someone in the office, to risk everything. And yet, here we are," I said, voice low. She looked at me, searching for reassurance. "Here we are," she echoed, letting the words linger. Over the next few days, we tried to rebuild a routine, one that no longer relied on secrecy. Lunches became public but cautious. Weekend walks became our private space. Evenings were filled with long conversations, but nothing that could be interpreted incorrectly if someone glimpsed us. It was delicate, balancing the public and the private, but I found solace in it. in her presence, in her words, in the way she still looked at me when she thought no one else could see. Then came the first major test. A new project required me to present directly to a client. Corrine had been heavily involved in the initial planning stages, and now, without her title or presence at the firm, the spotlight fell entirely on me. I felt both terrified and strangely alive. I knew that this project could define my career, and for the first time, I realized she had given me more than guidance. She had given me confidence. The day of the presentation, I walked into the boardroom with my notes prepared, every detail rehearsed. The clients arrived and I began my pitch. My voice wavered initially, but as I explained the data, I felt her lessons echoing in my mind. Structure, clarity, anticipate questions before they're asked. By the end, the clients were nodding, impressed. I stepped back, relief washing over me. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A single message from her. "I'm proud of you." My chest tightened. Pride from Corrine Lawson, not as a boss, not as a figure of authority, but as someone who cared. That was worth more than any title, more than any applause. But reality always has a way of intruding. One Friday afternoon, I heard murmurs again in the break room. A few associates were talking quietly, glancing at me. I pretended not to notice, but my stomach churned. Later that day, my manager asked to see me in his office. I walked in cautiously. "Adam," he began, "I hear there's been some changes with Corrine." I nodded slowly. "Yes, sir. She stepped down, but everything is under control." His eyes narrowed. "Under control?" "Yes," I replied. "Nothing has affected my work." He leaned back, steepling his fingers. "I hope that's true, because the firm has a reputation to maintain." I swallowed hard. "It is true, sir, I assure you." That night, I met Corrine at her apartment. She was quiet when I arrived. "What happened?" I asked. She shook her head. "Rumors are starting to spread beyond the office. Some of our contacts noticed the shift in dynamics. Nothing concrete, but it's enough." I felt frustration bubbling. "So we can't even exist outside of work without scrutiny?" She sighed. "We can, but we have to be patient, careful, strategic." She looked at me then, something vulnerable in her gaze. "Do you think it's worth it?" I took her hands in mine. "I don't think about worth. I think about you. I think about us." She let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. "I want this to work," she admitted, "more than I've wanted anything in a long time. But the risk, it's real." I nodded, understanding. Love had never been easy for either of us. For her, authority and responsibility had always been her shield. For me, caution and ambition had been mine. Now we were learning how to navigate together, balancing hearts and careers. And though every step forward felt dangerous, the truth was undeniable. The bond we had formed wasn't going to dissolve because of office politics or whispered warnings. It had survived mistakes, risk, and exposure. And if we were careful, patient, and honest, it could thrive. That night, as we sat together in the dim light of her apartment, I realized that life had a way of testing you exactly where you were most vulnerable. But it also had a way of rewarding courage in ways you couldn't predict. And I knew deep in my chest that what we were building, this connection, this trust, was worth every obstacle we'd already faced and every challenge still to come. The weeks after the presentation felt like walking a tightrope. Every interaction at work was carefully measured. Every conversation, every laugh, every glance with Corrine had to be cautious yet meaningful. We found ways to be together without raising suspicion. Weekend walks, early morning coffee before anyone arrived, subtle texts during lunch hours. But even that required restraint. Each stolen moment carried a charge, a quiet thrill, and a reminder of how fragile it all was. One Monday morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. I wanted to organize my thoughts, prepare for the client calls, and avoid any unnecessary interaction with coworkers who might be gossiping. As I approached my desk, I noticed a small envelope lying on my keyboard. No name, no indication of who had left it. I hesitated before opening it. Inside was a single sheet of paper typed, "People are watching. Be careful." My chest tightened. It wasn't threatening, but it wasn't vague either. Someone knew, or at least suspected. I tried to dismiss it as coincidence. Maybe someone was protective. Maybe it was someone unrelated. But the timing was unsettling. My mind immediately went to Corrine. I didn't mention it to her yet, but I couldn't stop thinking about who might have access to such information. That night, I found her waiting for me at our usual cafe. She slid into the booth across from me, her face calm but serious. "I saw the note," I said immediately. She didn't flinch. She took a slow sip of her coffee before speaking. "I expected something like this. You think we've gone unnoticed, but in a firm like ours, nothing stays hidden for long." I shook my head. I hate feeling like this, like we can't exist without consequences looming over us. She reached across the table, brushing my hand. "Then we become smarter, not reckless. Visibility isn't a problem if we're cautious, aware, and prepared." Her calm reassured me, but the tension didn't completely fade. It reminded me how easily love could be complicated by life, responsibility, and the choices we made. Over the next few days, the whispers seemed to intensify. People glanced at me differently, some with curiosity, others with subtle judgment. I kept my head down, focused on work, relying on Corinne's quiet advice when things felt overwhelming. At night, we would meet in her apartment or at a small park, sharing our day, venting our fears, and reminding each other that what mattered most was our trust. Every touch, every whispered word, every subtle smile became a lifeline in the chaos around us. Then came the day that changed everything. It was late in the afternoon when I received a phone call from one of the senior partners, someone I had always respected for his fairness. His tone was unusually direct. "Adam, we need to talk, now." My stomach twisted. I hurried to his office, wondering if the complaint had escalated further. When I arrived, he gestured for me to sit. "Adam, I'm going to be honest with you," he began, his voice measured. "The firm's management is concerned about the ongoing situation. They're worried it's affecting performance and perception, even if there's no tangible misconduct. They want us to intervene." "Intervene how?" I asked cautiously. He looked me in the eye. "We're suggesting a temporary reassignment, away from direct oversight of Miss Lawson, until things settle." The words hit me like a punch. A temporary reassignment. It wasn't a termination, but it was close. It was a separation of everything we had carefully built over weeks. I exhaled slowly, trying to stay composed. "I understand." I didn't, not really, but I nodded. "And Corrine?" I asked, my voice tight. "She's aware. This is standard procedure. No one is making accusations, but the firm can't take risks." I left the office feeling hollow, my thoughts spiraling. How were we supposed to maintain this connection when everything about our daily lives was being pulled apart? That evening, I met Corrine at our usual park. She was sitting on the bench, her coat wrapped tightly around her. Her eyes met mine, and I saw both determination and exhaustion. "They're moving me to another project," I said softly. "A temporary reassignment." She exhaled, leaning back against the bench. "I expected it," she said quietly. "The firm won't take the chance of anyone perceiving favoritism, even if there isn't any." I sat beside her, gripping her hand. "I hate that it's happening," I admitted. "Me too, but we knew the risk, and this doesn't change anything if we handle it right." I looked at her, searching for hope. "How do we handle it?" She smiled faintly. "We continue as we have, carefully. Separate at work, together in our private lives. No reckless moves, no unnecessary exposure. We protect what we have while proving we can navigate the world outside it." The next few weeks were a test of patience. At work, we maintained distance. Our interactions were brief, professional, and precise. Every email was scrutinized before sending, every meeting carefully timed to avoid suspicion. And yet, when evening came, we found each other. Late-night walks, coffee at quiet cafes, the small apartment she had moved into after stepping down. Those moments became sacred. They reminded me of what mattered most: trust, connection, and honesty. One night, after a particularly long day, we sat on her balcony watching the city lights flicker below. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked quietly. She turned to me, her eyes thoughtful. "Not for a second, not for one moment. It was reckless, yes, but it revealed truth, and truth is worth risk." I nodded, feeling a rush of relief and love. "Even if the world is against us?" She smiled, brushing my hair back. "Especially then, because that's when trust matters most." But the world always has a way of reminding you of consequences. One morning, an unexpected visitor arrived at my apartment. HR, unannounced, asking questions I hadn't anticipated. They probed into personal routines, lunch habits, anything that could be construed as impropriety. I answered carefully, honestly, and without revealing more than necessary. By the time they left, I felt exhausted, drained, and more aware than ever of the fragility of what we were holding on to. That evening, I went straight to Corinne's apartment. She opened the door before I could knock. Her face was tired, her posture slightly slouched, but there was warmth in her eyes. We embraced, holding each other tightly, the weight of the week pressing down on both of us. "It's hard," I admitted, "more than I thought it would be." She nodded, resting her forehead against mine. "It's the test. Every strong bond has one. We're being tested, Adam, but the way we survive it will define us." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I don't want to survive this. I want us to thrive." She smiled softly. "Then we do, carefully, thoughtfully, together." And in that moment, as the city hummed around us, I realized something profound. Love wasn't just about passion or stolen moments. It was about patience, resilience, and choosing each other again and again, even when the world threatened to pull everything apart. We held each other late into the night, speaking in whispers, planning for the days ahead, and reinforcing the trust that had grown between us. The risks were real, the consequences were tangible, but so was the bond that had emerged from chaos, fear, and impulsive choices. And as I drifted off to sleep that night, hand in hand with Corinne, I understood something I hadn't before. Love tested by fire isn't weak. It's forged, stronger and more unshakable than anything else. Now there was only one question left lingering in my mind, one that would determine the next chapter of our story. The following week felt like walking through fog. Every interaction at the office, every passing colleague, every whisper or glance felt amplified. The temporary reassignment had gone into effect. I no longer reported directly to Corinne, and our daily lives in the office were almost entirely separate. It was an invisible barrier, yet heavier than any wall I had ever encountered. And yet the pull between us remained unbroken, electric, and undeniable. Every evening, every quiet corner of the city, every cafe or park bench became sacred ground, a reminder that what we had was real, and it had survived months of careful deception, scrutiny, and fear. One evening, as we sat on the balcony of her apartment, the city lights flickering like distant stars, I realized something. The distance, the secrecy, the rules, they were teaching us something vital. How to love with intention, with patience, and with courage. How to protect something fragile without smothering it. "I can't keep doing this," I admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "The stolen moments, the rules, the fear, it's exhausting." She turned toward me, eyes reflecting the amber glow of the city lights. "I know," she said softly, But sometimes the things worth holding on to are worth the challenge, and this, us, it is worth the challenge. I reached for her hand, intertwining our fingers. I want more than moments, I said quietly. I want a future where this isn't a secret, where we don't have to be careful every time someone glances in our direction. Her gaze softened, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "And what if the world isn't ready for that?" she asked. "Then we wait," I said firmly, "but we don't hide, not from each other, not from ourselves." The following morning, I arrived at work early, carrying that resolve like armor. I had made a decision. If our relationship was strong enough to survive months of secrecy, scrutiny, and whispers, it deserved the courage of truth. I requested a private meeting with Mr. Delaney. His office smelled of leather and polished wood, the walls lined with awards and framed photos of the firm's history. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "Sir, I'd like to discuss Corinne and me," I began, my voice calm but resolute. He raised an eyebrow. "Go ahead." "We've been careful, yes," I continued, "but our relationship is real. Outside of work, it exists honestly. I understand company policy, but I also believe that honesty is better than secrecy. Hiding it isn't protecting the firm, it's inviting risk." He leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. His expression was unreadable. "You're suggesting disclosure," he said finally. "Yes," I said firmly. "We're willing to be transparent, answer questions, follow guidelines, but we will not abandon what we have built. It is important to both of us." He studied me for a long moment. Then he exhaled. "This could set a precedent," he said carefully. "The board will need to review. But your initiative, coming forward voluntarily, does carry weight." That small acknowledgement felt like victory, not because it solved everything, but because it meant we were taking control, refusing to be victims of circumstance or rumor. That evening, I met Corinne at the same cafe where it had all started. I told her what I had done. She listened quietly, her eyes reflecting pride and caution in equal measure. "You really did that?" she asked softly. I nodded. "Because what we have is worth honesty, worth standing up for." She reached across the table, her fingers brushing mine. "Then we face it together," she said simply. "Together." And we meant it. The board meeting was tense. Questions were precise, probing, and calculated. But Corinne and I answered honestly, consistently, and with clarity. We emphasized the professionalism of our work, the separation of personal and business matters, and our willingness to follow the firm's guidance. Hours later, the outcome came. They accepted our disclosure. We would remain in our positions, under oversight for a probationary period, but our roles and integrity were intact. I felt a wave of relief I didn't realize I'd been holding back. Corinne exhaled beside me, leaning into my shoulder for a brief, grounding moment. "We made it," she whispered. I nodded. "We did. Together." In the weeks that followed, the whispers faded. The subtle glances, the cautious murmurs slowly disappeared. People treated us professionally once more, unaware of the storm that had passed behind closed doors. And yet the experience had changed us. It had forced us to communicate like never before, to trust in ways that were uncomfortable, vulnerable, and transformative. It had forced us to confront fear, risk, and the power of our choices. And through it all, the bond between us had grown stronger, more intentional, more real. One Saturday evening, months later, we returned to the park where everything first felt possible. The city stretched out beneath us, lights twinkling like embers in a dark sky. Corinne turned to me, eyes soft, reflective. "Do you remember that night?" she asked. I smiled faintly, recalling the first time she had knocked on my door. "How could I forget?" I said. It felt like everything changed in a single moment. She reached for my hand, her fingers intertwined with mine. It did, and it still does. Every day we choose this, every day we show up for each other, it changes us. It makes us stronger. I nodded, feeling the truth of her words in my chest. And I would choose it again, I admitted, voice low but steady, even knowing the risk, even knowing how complicated it would be. She leaned into me, her head resting on my shoulder. I would too, she whispered, always. The months that followed were quiet in their own way. We settled into a rhythm that balanced work, life, and our relationship. Challenges still arose, late nights, unexpected deadlines, and the occasional lingering rumor, but none of them shook the foundation we had carefully built. We had learned to communicate honestly, act intentionally, and trust in each other's loyalty. We had discovered that love forged through adversity wasn't fragile, it was resilient. And it wasn't just about passion or stolen moments, it was about patience, courage, and a willingness to face the world together no matter what. On a crisp autumn evening, as we walked home hand in hand, the city streets quiet around us, I realized the most important truth. Mistakes can lead to disaster, but they can also lead to growth. Reckless words, impulsive actions, they can create chaos, but they can also reveal truth. And when two people are willing to confront that truth together, when they choose honesty, trust, and courage over fear, something extraordinary can happen, something lasting, something real. We paused under a street lamp, its warm glow casting long shadows behind us. Corrine turned to me, eyes bright. "Whatever happens next," she said softly, "we face it, together." I smiled, squeezing her hand. "Together," I echoed. And in that moment, I understood that the greatest risk we had taken, the one text, one moment of honesty, had led to the greatest reward, a love grounded in trust, respect, and resilience. No more secrets, no more fear, just us facing the world side by side. And that, I realized, was worth everything.